This is a poem that really tends to pull all this together. It's by Rumi. Out beyond ideas, wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field, and I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense when you're in this field.
When life throws a challenge at you, one thing is certain. To find a resolution for every issue, every problem, for everybody, there's more than one way. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the More Than One Way podcast. I'm Whitney Ross, and I would love to tell you about a conversation we recently had with a guest with us here on the podcast. Our guest was Joe Zarantonello. He described his own last name as an opera. He said you have to sing it. And I think that's a great way to describe Joe, really a person of great wisdom and experience who joined us for a conversation all about the difference between belief and experience and how we navigate those two and how we, the connection between them, but also the challenges between them. Joe is a natural and gifted teacher who's taught in schools and universities and now has a teaching practice out of his guest house in Bardstown, Kentucky called Loose Leaf Hollow, which is a place where he gathers people together to talk about meditation and other things. And he also does his practice online, which is really great. So he's found a way past COVID to extend his teaching and his practices into the digital world, and he's here to do that with us today, and we're so glad that he joined us. And I think you'll really appreciate this conversation. Joe mentions many resources and books and quotes and different things that we'll have links for you in the show notes. If any of those resonate with you and you want to take a look at those a little more deeply. And I think you'll especially appreciate the way that this whole conversation begins. It's a little different, but it's right on theme with what we're talking about. So thank you again for joining us, and let's jump right into the conversation.
Okay, so like we talked about before, Joe, something that is of interest to me and I think us is kind of the tension / relationship between belief / faith and deep encounter / experience. You know what I mean? And one of the things that I was wondering just from your experience is how those two things have played out in your life, how you've seen those things at work in your life. Faith, belief, and experience, encounter with presence, for lack of a better way to put it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Good question. I remembered you said you're interested in that, so I've been thinking about it. And let's start with experience.
Okay, great.
And if we can do just a couple minute experience, I think it'll clarify a lot. So I'm gonna, if it's all right, I'll just lead you into this, and
okay,
you guys
great.
play along, and the listeners can do the same. Okay?
Great, thank you.
All right, if you just sit comfortably and shut your eyes for a minute, and then place both your hands on your thighs, just palms up, and just breathe, take a few breaths, just settle into this posture. Experience what it feels like to sit this way. And then if you could just take your right hand and raise it up and put it out straight in front of you. And then turn your hand 180 degrees so the palm is facing down. And then make a fist. And squeeze it a little bit tighter here. And now just to be aware of the body, starting with the fist, but also the wrist, the whole arm, and the rest of the body as we hold it here just for a minute. It won't be long. But just be aware of what is going on in the body as you make the fist. Now tighten the fist a little bit more. And see how far the feeling of the fist travels down your arm, and does it travel into your body. Just sit with that just for a few seconds and just be aware. How far does it go? How does the rest of the body react to it? And now just move your awareness to your left hand and just see how that feels. Resting face up on your thigh. Notice the difference between the two hands. Just be aware of the difference. And now on your right hand, rotate it back 180 degrees and then open the hand and feel what that feels like. Be aware of it. Just experience what that feels like to open that hand. And then place it back down on your thigh. Okay, you can open your eyes now. What were you aware of during that? That was just a little 2-3 minute exercise. What were you aware of as that happened?
Well, I was aware of pain. My hand hurt, my fist hurt, and the tighter I gripped it, the more pain I felt all the way up my arm into my stomach, and it even affected my head a bit. So I just didn't feel good.
Yeah. Okay. What did you feel?
I felt it kind of radiating around my shoulder, just from my fist up to my shoulder, and felt tension, just tightness there on that side.
Yeah. And now just sort of check in just for a moment to both of your palms now. Put your awareness in both of your palms. Yeah. Now, you know what I mean by experience, right?
Yeah.
It's in the body. It's part of your sensational gift of this life. Is so we have sensation. So that's experience. I would contend that the right hand in the fist position is belief, and the left hand face up on your thigh is faith. Notice the difference between those two images of the arm outstretched with the fist, sort of face down, and then just a hand open. Now, I think that's how you can make a distinction, at least in what how I would use the words, between belief / faith. Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I'd say there's belief and there's faith.
Right.
And belief, you're holding on to an idea.
Okay.
And sometimes, if you do it hard enough, it becomes a fist. And, all the religious wars all over, not just religious, but wars in general, it's that fist. And it's not healthy. That's a stress position you're in. Imagine, that's a belief. You could believe it doesn't have to be religion. You could believe that the last election was stolen. It's the same thing. A belief is gripping around an idea so hard that you won't let it go. Can't let it go. Now, faith is like the open hand. It's just open to the moment, trusting the moment. It's ready to receive what the moment brings. So I think that's important, because I had a guy who was a good friend of mine. I went to Notre Dame with him, and he just says, "Well, I'm just not a believer." I said, "Thank God," because belief is a rigidity around a concept. And I said, God's not a concept. life isn't a concept. And so actually he was sort of ahead of the game. Yeah, so if that's any help, I think that really, just so we know what we're really talking about, and experience shows us the difference. You could parse words, but there's a big difference between belief. It's like Carl Jung said, he said, I don't believe in God. I know God. And by that he meant I've experienced.
Yeah.
I've experienced the transcendent. See, it wasn't led there by a series of concepts. So I think that's important to say at the get-go if we're going to talk about belief, faith, experience. Okay?
Yeah.
And so that, I think that helps.
Yeah, thank you for the distinction.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping us experience the distinction between the two. In my life, I've been an Episcopal priest for 32 years now. How did the two get so, in your opinion, intertwined, faith and belief? Because your friend's comment, "I'm just not a believer," is a fairly common comment, but it might be in the other direction. I am a believer.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you see the two getting so intertwined?
Well, I'm working now with my online meditation group, the Heart to Heart group on Sundays, working through working with meditation, which we're always working on. It's the center of we do 3 different types of meditation. I give a talk, which is a listening meditation, spoken meditation. Then we go into silence, practicing a kind of formal meditation. And then we have a community give and take, a kind of communion meditation. But the centerpiece is always learning how to just sit there, just the way we did, and just experiencing being there. And my background in meditation is a kind of hybrid. Growing up Catholic in the 50s, my first meditation experience was probably being an altar boy at Mass. Young boy at the Catholic Mass then was in Latin. So it was a mystical experience. I learned enough Latin to be an altar boy. I didn't, I could still do that altar boy Latin, but and the priest was faced away from the congregation in those days. And there's a lot of good that came with Vatican II. Of course, people could understand what's being said, but it wasn't really a conceptual experience. It was a symbolic experience. It was an experience more than anything conceptual, because you didn't know what the priest was saying other than the homily was in English. Give more money. A lot of cases, yeah. But
that's a very common homily,
which is important. I mean, you got to get the lights on, but it was primarily an experience, and then of course, the Catholic Church, the bells and the smells, as they say. It's a lot of that kind of stuff. But it was mostly an experience, and that changed for good or for ill, a little bit of both with Vatican II, because then it became something conceptual. They were speaking our language.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Mass still has some poetry to it, for sure, but it's meant to be an experience. It's meant to be an experience, first of all, and I think it's like what Jung said, I've experienced God. So how did faith become belief? Well, the Jesus movement got in bed with the Roman Empire, and that had a lot to do with it. But really, it's in our left brain. What I'm teaching folks to do now in meditation, just being here, just being in the presence. And then all of a sudden, we're not in the present. We spiral out into some kind of thought loop. Mm-hmm. And I'm really working with them on to try to, once you realize, because all forms of meditation are like you're sitting in the presence and then you're not, you're looping out. into some thought loop. That's just the left brain. And then you come back. Then you're back, you're back in experience. See, just sitting here being in experience is prayer. You don't have to ask for anything. It is meditation, just to be in the presence and to be aware and to experience. As Jesus said, I came to bring you life and bring you it in abundance. And so that's what you're trying to experience, the abundance, the feel of the awareness of sitting here, the sounds, the feel of the temperature in the room. It's all your five senses are wide open. That is prayer, that is meditation without the words. But then the words start in your mind. You loop out.
Yeah.
And you're in these kind of obsessive loops, self-centered, of course. That's why we love them, because it's the ego loves that space. I one time was sitting 20 minutes, in an intensive retreat. It was 20 minutes back then, and I wasn't aware. I wasn't present for even 1 second. The first time I was really present was when the bell rang for the end of the session, and then I was back. I mean, I was just looping out there, just thinking. So we have this kind of poles of lost in thought, and then experience, being here. And I would contend that if you can learn how to meditate, and I'm trying to teach my brothers and sisters in the group to name it. As you bring yourself back, just name what you're doing. Oh, judging again. Planning. To doing. When you're sitting there thinking about your to-do list in meditation. So I'm trying to teach them to actually name it when you come back. Jesus, again, named the demons, and they didn't like it. Who told you my name? Don't say my name. And then sometimes in the Gerasene scene, he says, what is your name?
Yeah.
See, so the naming, so there's a certain power to that. And then if, when you say judging again for the 10,000th time, it gets weaker.
Interesting.
Or you say planning again, or worrying again, just worrying. Once you say that the 100,000 times, it can't run your life anymore. It becomes conscious, you see. And so how belief and faith got joined at the hip was just the left brain. And the ego, I mean, that's the realm. You're out there because you're afraid of being right here with the mystery. So we go out there and we sort of love that kind of looping. I have one person I've been working with some years now who was convinced that they were the absolute worst person in the world. I said, really? I mean, Saddam Hussein, Hitler. No, I really, she believes she was absolutely the worst person in the world. Now, what a belief that is.
Yeah.
Took a long time and a lot of experience there. So the ego takes you out because it runs on fear. You look at what things run on. Now, the interesting thing about the roots of Christian prayer and meditation, the Christian journey to God, is it runs on love. The 14th century Cloud of Unknowing by the anonymous monk, English monk, he says, you can pierce the cloud of unknowing and get to God only by love, never by thought. And so this experiencing that is real meditation or real prayer in whatever tradition, it's about experiencing life, capital L, the great mystery, God, the presence. You could give it different labels, but you're just sitting in experience.
Yeah.
Or you're thinking. So there's this kind of, it's not attention so much as a kind of bandwidth between being in an awareness or being aware of life, or I'm thinking about something.
Yeah.
Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does.
And I think it's just a function of the left brain. The Empire didn't help it any, because the Empire didn't want 54 gospels. It said, let's just, you can't run an empire with so many points of view. And they were all, if you ever read the Gnostic Gospels, you just get a real window into these communities. And Jesus he was not wasn't a meme. He was so rounded that he had so many faces. So he was so incredible that you couldn't get just one view of him, let alone four. Mm-hmm. So there was well over 50 gospels that they finally found of these communities that had a different relationship to this way that he was talking about. And same with Buddhism. There's many different views in Buddhism, and same with Christianity as it exists now. Mm-hmm. They're all saying different.
So part of what I hear from you about experiencing is consciousness. Getting to that place of where you can be present in the moment, truly conscious and present in the moment, with all that brings, and that somehow or another, when we can get into that place of conscious presence in the moment, we will encounter life in some way, and that it's as simple as that. As simple and hard as that. And that our left brain / ego, and our left brain / ego wants to kind of keep the chatter going. Wants to, and that thoughtful brain can be helpful in places, but it's not necessarily helpful for being present in the moment.
Yeah, and that's just not for formal meditation. That's what I call, there's a difference in when you just thought, if you just want to think about thought, there's two different kinds of thought. There's dysfunctional thinking, and then there's functional thinking. Yeah. Mm-hmm. For instance, because a lot of times people throw it all out. They say, the left brain's, the ego, get rid of it. Well, I don't think you would want to get rid of it, because if you have a toothache, you say, all right, you look up your dentist's phone number and you call them and you make an appointment. That's the functional use of thought. Or you have to bake a cake, so you read the recipe and you follow the steps. Or the power goes out, and then you'd use the scientific method to try to figure out where the problem is. That's functional thought too, because that's in the service of life. See, okay. But dysfunctional thought is more what we're doing all the time, and meditation gives you a window into that, of what you're doing all the time. For instance, this morning before we hooked up, I took a walk down my road. I have this 2-kilometer walk. I walk down the gravel road and then go to the dead end and back. It's about 2 kilometers. I do it most days. In a year, I can walk the Camino, but in 2-kilometer portions. And I'll be walking along, and all of a sudden, I'm looping out into some thought, and I could, sometimes I can get, pretty far down the road before I realize I haven't heard a bird, I haven't seen a flower, I haven't looked at the sky. Yeah. I'm just really, that eclipses the awareness, say. Yeah. And so then I usually stop, take a breath, and then I'm back. Then I'm walking. I'm walking. I'm feeling the gravel under. And so that's just one example. This is just not something that happens in meditation. It happens all the time. And so the difference between a Buddha, say, or a Christ, and let's just keep it with Buddha. The difference between a Buddha and a normal person is the normal person is probably spending 5 or 10% of their awake life in awareness, actually seeing, feeling, actually living. And the other 80 or 90% is they're in a kind of tape loop. It's this voice that's always narrating. It's like your life is a baseball game and it's playing, errors, hits, all this kind of stuff. It's the way it is. That's maybe a normal person who's not even on any kind of path. I hadn't even looked at this. And then at the other extreme, a Buddha would be somebody who was 100% in experience. I'm not sure that, the Buddha is away, but I'm not sure there's any, actually, even the historical Buddha, he kept practicing for 40 years. And so you're moving yourself down the line. More of this life is spent in awareness. And as that happens, the amount of time you spend thinking about life goes down. So it's a kind of sliding scale. That's why this is a long path. And but it's incremental. And formal practice helps, but it's about experiencing life in abundance. I mean, picking almost any person on the planet besides being in Knoxville or Bardstown, if you get out of the United States or you get out of the places we live, if you could pull those people into our life right now, they'd be deliriously overjoyed. People from Haiti, where I go, people from Gaza, Sudan, the Congo, parts of Asia, the majority of people are suffering greatly. And we're in a situation that's amazing. It's I called one of my fellow pilgrims who I call every week. I called her the other day, and she said, "Good morning." I said, "Good morning." She says, "How are you?" I said, "Well, mostly sensational." And she laughed, and I laughed, but it was the truth, because I just had a sensational walk where I'd spent most of my time on the walk. And so I think when you get going towards the Buddha end or going towards the mystic end, you become mostly sensational. And then you just think, St. Francis said, preach the gospel at all times. Use words only if necessary. So, it's this idea of becoming more and more, your life becomes more and more sensational. That's at least my experience. I wouldn't go back to being 20. I wouldn't mind having certain parts of my body 20-year-old back when I was 20. But in terms of the life, no, I was anxious and driven and all that stuff. I spent most of my time in these thought loops, judging, striving, That makes some sense. So it is a kind of sliding scale that, and Jesus said it was the way. And this is the way, Buddhist. And, Jesus spoke. Yeah.
In your experience, how long does it take for somebody, not like a specific time, but when does this start resonating with people, what you're talking about? Because so much of life is, kind of getting socialized and getting a job and living within the context of our society as we have it, oftentimes is that driven world, and that seems to be normative. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
yes.
What is it usually, what, in your experience, how do people shift into what you're talking about, which is a much more, once again, present, aware, conscious life?
Yeah. There's grace.
Yeah.
The motto of this place is creating a space for grace. In other words, somehow letting it in. So there's grace that, it's a mystery that we're alive at all. We're living as a mystery inside a mystery. And so there are forces unimaginable that are working to pull you into this, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
When we created the word God from the German word gut, which meant good. There was a sense that there's something good operating in the universe. The Zen tradition calls this, whatever you want to call it, a formless field of benefaction. In other words, good but doesn't really have a form. But we have this feeling that, we say, thank goodness. Something intervenes in life. We don't earn it. It happens. So there's always grace. But in terms of in terms of what brings a human being on a fast track into it, it's to have a meditation practice, in a solid meditation practice, in whatever tradition. The fact that we have just rediscovered a tradition that had been lost for 700 years, which is of contemplation. You could do centering prayer if that's your flavor. As the Dalai Lama said, I told you, he said,
Oh yeah.
there are many flavors, and so you find a flavor that you fit in with, but they're all the same in the sense that the idea is awareness, coming into awareness. I wrote a poem. I have this poem here. When people come here, and if they've never meditated at all, I give them this poem. And so we're sitting down to Zendo, and I will recite it for them. And later they say, "Can I have a copy of that?" And I say, "Yeah, I have copies here." It's a little poem. It goes like this. This is sort of the entry point. It's called the Hokey Pokey. It goes like this. You make awareness the master and thinking the servant. You make now primary and time secondary. You make being your purpose and doing flows from it. That's how you turn yourself around. And that's really what it's all about. It's that simple. And people want to, you can read books on meditation, but it's really that. So we're doing this kind of flip. Awareness is, in contemplative traditions, East and West, has to do with the heart. The heart is the organ of awareness that just is aware, that just resonates with what's going on in the body and out there. So that's a symbol of the heart. And of course, the left brain, the mind. The Buddhists, when they talk about mind, that can be confusing. They talk about small mind and big mind. Big mind is the awareness. Small mind is the left brain. And so, we've lost this tradition in the West for 700 years. The guy's writing in the 14th century, the Cloud of Unknowing. But, for the last, it's, I think, therefore I am, right?
Yeah.
Science came in and, there's the science and spirituality is not at odds at all. Again, remember Jung. I've experienced the transcendent. I don't believe in it. Once you get it, and that's what the Buddhists call the one taste. So that's sort of what happens with the group I'm working with. And somehow it'll happen just even by grace. All of a sudden you get a taste of something beyond the transactional world. You become, just for even a split second, transparent to the transcendent. Something comes in. And it can happen. Meditation is all about that. It's about showing up, just to, make aware. You make awareness the master and thinking the servant. So you start doing what we did, just settling into the body. You make now primary and time secondary. I mean, we're always living on the clock, and that's good. We showed up today at 10:45, and here we are. That's not the problem. The problem is this inner kind of hurry that we have, especially in our culture. When I go to Haiti, they've got a lot of drawbacks, but they're in no hurry. I'm going to Italy. It's where my folks came from. And, when you go to Italy, it's moving at a different pace. It's a different pace. So in our culture, there's just this hurry, this sense of hurry. Merton identified it in the 50s. Little did he know what it'd be like now. Yeah. He said this hurry is a sense of violence. You're just, So you make now primary when you sit in meditation, and time is relative, secondary. And then you make being your purpose. Why do you sit? Just to be here with the ground of being, as Tillich called the transcendent. It's the ground of all being. So you're sitting. That's why the Buddha is always pictured sitting on the ground. He's grounded. Interestingly enough, that's the meaning of the word fundamentalist. Someone who's sitting on the ground, the fundament. That's the firmament. The sky is the firmament. So this this connection between heaven and earth is dissolved or strengthened when you can sit in meditation. So that's the hokey pokey, and it's all you really need to get started.
Yeah.
You do this, but you got to actually make this flip. And one of the things when you loop out from being is the time comes into it. In experience, there is no time.
Yeah.
There is no time. But when you're thinking, there's nothing but time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just knowing some of the people who are our listeners and talking to them about stuff like this, their lives are so busy and production oriented. And whenever we talk about meditation, or whenever I talk about it with them, it's usually something like, well, I'm just not good at that.
Well, that's our ego speaking, because the ego doesn't want anything about it, of course. And people say, yeah, I have that same experience with my folks. I have people who think, oh, well, that might be all right for Joe, but I mean, I'm not suited for this. Well, it's not so. Have you ever encountered The Stroke of Insight by Jill Bolte Taylor? Do you know that?
Yes,
Know that?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a TED Talk on this. You could just, your listeners could look up Stroke of Insight by Jill Bolte Taylor. And it's a great talk. We'll get you into, but she was a Harvard neurologist, brain scientist, and her left brain went offline, and she had a stroke, and it went offline. And so she was just left with her right brain. The right brain is connected to the body and to all the heart and to all the physical functions. So that's all she had. And it was a kind of bliss state. She's just present. Time was not in there. Time is here, something we make up here in the left brain. Yeah, we created clocks and measurement and, trees. Well, go hug a tree and ask them what time it is. You won't get an answer there. I mean, it's just time is the chronological time is relatively real and sometimes very useful. But eternity, now, you make now primary and time secondary. Now is the reality. It's the absolute reality. And she had no sense of time, nor could she tried to call and tell somebody what was going on, and she had no sense of words. She just barked into the dog. It sounded like a collie or something. She just couldn't form words. Of course, they operated on her, and after about 6 months, she got that back online. But during that 6 months, it'd be like a 6 months meditation retreat. I mean, it's much better to do meditation than to have to learn that way. But that was grace for her.
Yeah.
It just, yeah. And so you're primarily sitting. It's primarily a right brain activity. That's why chant helps. I mean, I'm just a half an hour down the way from Merton's Monastery, Gethsemane, and the monks chant. Chanting is repetitive. And Om Mani Padme Hum over and over and over. It's repetitive, and the left brain doesn't do repetitive. It's not interested. It sort of goes to sleep. Yeah, there is a struggle. I mean, but anybody can do this. It's the simplest thing in the world. You stop the doing for a while. Thinking is always about doing. I mean, watch your own thoughts.
Yeah,
it's about doing. And some people have a hard time. You probably have a fair amount of retired people in your, and people often say, gee, I'm busier now than when I was working.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Well, it's because the mind doesn't stop, you see. And so, and another point that you asked, I really didn't answer it. The second half of life is for this work. I mean, if you have the, some people literally don't have that margin. Haitians are working till they drop dead because they're so on the margins. But in our country, with the people probably belong to your church, the people that come to my church on Sunday, they have computers. They're probably, we don't have to work all the time. And that really is very much even an ancient view in the Hindu religion, which is the oldest religion. There's the first half of life and the second half of life.
Yeah.
And we're living 80, 90 years, which they weren't in ancient Hinduism. So we actually have a third act. So we have the last 2/3 of our life in a way, in the sense that we could really concentrate on this.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's an ultimate. To me, it's once it becomes an ultimate concern. I want to have this relationship with life. I want to deepen my relationship to life. So if that becomes your ultimate concern, nothing can stop you.
Yeah.
I think it can be easy to jump into evaluation, like when Thom was talking about meditation and saying, I'm not good at this. I think our natural reaction is to judge or evaluate our process or our progress, when what it seems to be you're saying more is to let that part of it go and just just the act itself is enough.
And that's the process. You're out in the thought world in your thought loop, and then you bring yourself back. I mean, one of my biggest kind of clump in the thought world is judgment, and that doesn't begin with you. It begins with me. Self-judgment. That's what that is. When they say I'm not really that good in that. Well, there's no evaluation whatsoever. So you bring it back, judging myself. And after you do that 10,000 times, that's why it has to be a kind of daily, repetitive thing for a while to wear it out. David White, who's a great poet who taught me how to write, he said, part of the idea of writing is you write the same thing over and over and over again until you get sick of it. You write the same sentence 10,000 times, and then it has no, you're not interested in it anymore. So if you do this work, which essentially is sort of boring on one level, the left brain is not interested in it. And the left brain is judging it, saying, you're not very good in it, give it up. It's trying to short, resistance. Just resistance. I tell people that's nonsense. Just keep sitting and just give it time.
Yeah, that's nonsense. Just keep sitting. That's such
you're meant to actually have this deeper relationship with the transcendent, with the mystery, with God, with the divine, however you want to call it. We're meant to go deeper because it's, this is actually blasphemy in some place, but you have that in yourself.
Yeah.
At your very center. Merton often quoted something that came from the what was it called, the 24 prophets. But there's a line that Merton picked up on, and Merton used it. He said, God. He was talking about God. He said, it's the center is everywhere, the circumference is nowhere.
Yeah.
And that was an old Greek kind of mystical text that he used. He said, you want to know what God's like? Its center is everywhere. Its circumference is nowhere. So to believe that that the ultimate mystery is in you, and it you just have to bring it forth. That would be, some people would say that's heresy. I mean, really, that's what got Jesus in trouble.
Yeah.
I and the Father are one. Well, that didn't fly in those days.
Yeah. It still doesn't in a lot of ways. Yeah.
That was blasphemy.
Yeah. I mean, it's still hard for people once again in my experience to realize that the inner life is real, and that what's going on inside is a lot of what all the religious stuff, in my opinion, is trying to talk about. And in what I'm hearing from you is experience can help us ease the tension of our belief, meaning ease the fist, Yeah. The more we can sit, the more we can sit in a place where we can experience our own inner world, it lessens the grip that belief has to have on us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it spreads out from the cushion, as they say, from your prayer space into. So you just when Thich Nhat Hanh came here in 1962, he had to leave Vietnam during the maybe it was 65, I can't remember, But he came on his first tour, and he was going around during the Vietnam War, and they interviewed him, and they said, what's your view of the American culture? And he paused the way he always pauses, and he sort of smiled, and he said, lost in thought. And he's the great teacher of mindfulness. Bring yourself back out of this world of thought into the here and now. Taste the orange that you're eating. Taste the tea. That's called the one taste. And it's even in the scriptures that Jesus knew. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord. Tasting is a little code word for experiencing.
Yeah.
For focusing on the awareness. Taste and see the goodness of this life, you see. Yeah. But the mystics, the poets, they still talk about it. They've always talked about it. They're the guys who let's face it, Jesus was rarely in church, and when he was, he got in trouble. Let's face it, he was in the streets. He was living life. The way I see Buddha and Jesus is Buddha sort of started this whole thing, and what we see in Jesus is what it's like if you're living it. He's living it. And, the disciples of John, they couldn't understand. These guys were eating, drinking. They weren't eating locust and honey. They were eating food. And, they were sort of, they were in the middle of life. They weren't going to the desert. They were in the middle of life. Jesus was rarely in church. How we made a churchy religion out of us. And don't get me wrong, I love churches. I love go sit in them. I love what they stand for. But, if you only do it 1 hour a week, that's like, that's crumbs. You're living on breadcrumbs, and anybody who's working at church is trying to get them to live this way, not just come for an hour,
yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's the ticket,
Yeah.
Yeah. The Hokey Pokey is a great guide, but it's been going for a long time. You just read, especially the Gospel of Thomas, that view of Jesus, that's the closest I can come to the kind of view I have, which is like a mixture of what we consider Christianity and Zen, because that Jesus was not like any of the other Jesuses. And so I'd really recommend that to just, because that's a Jesus who throws you back into yourself for the answer. He's like a sort of Zen master. Jesus.
Yeah.
I like that Jesus very much, but that's not orthodox.
Right.
Yeah.
That Jesus.
No,
I had
that's a whole nother kettle
friend,
of fish, right?
A pastor. Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, Orthodox is a whole nother kettle of fish because it's all about belief.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Orthodox is rather than orthopraxy, rather than practicing. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. The practice is the thing. This is a poem that really tends to pull all this together. It's by Rumi, 14th century Sufi from Turkey. And most people know about Rumi. That's the first thing I knew about anybody from the Muslim world. And he has a great poem. He says, and I recite this on the road when I come out to the big field. I stop and recite this every day, just for the hell of it, just because it means so much to me. But Rumi said, out beyond ideas, wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense when you're in this field. This unified field of experience, this unified field of love. Those last two lines are mine, which I add to it, because that's he actually in the hundreds of years ago, he was talking about the unified field that Einstein never could find in mathematics. It's this, it's a field that's out beyond ideas.
Yeah.
And he says, when you lay down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. So then you get silence. And he said, ideas, language, even the word each other doesn't make any sense when we're in this field. This unified field, I think he's talking about the unified field of experience, the unified field of God, the unified field of love. They're all the same. And that's there for everybody in a moment. And we've all had moments. I mean, that's where I'd start with people. I said, you've all had a moment where you broke through to that field, just even for a second. Yeah.
Joe, thank you so much for spending time with us today. We really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your experience as we talk about this together. And we, for our listeners, we'll have all kinds of links to you, to the resources that Joe mentioned, poems and different quotes and things, so that you can access that for yourself, as well as information about Joe's his retreat center there in Bardstown. So we thank you very much for joining us, and we hope that we'll talk to you again sometime.
Well, you're welcome. My pleasure. It's been fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the More Than One Way podcast, brought to you by the Center for Spiritual Practice in Knoxville, Tennessee. We really appreciate your time and would love to hear your feedback. You can reach us by emailing hello@morethanonewaypod.com, or you can connect with us on social media using the handle @morethanonewaypod. If you found this episode helpful, we hope that you'll share it with your friends, with your family, with people you work with all the people who you know. Thank you, and take care.